Hey everybody, this is John Mayer. I'm the executive director of Cali. It's summer. Thank you for taking a moment out of your summer to attend this webinar. This is an issue I am really passionate about, and I hope to be a little provocative and a little I hope to challenge your thinking on this point. And so I admit it's a clickbaity title, how law schools could save $150 million for their law students using open casebooks. And so I suppose I should not hide the ball and say, where did I get that 150 million? Well, I wrote an article, 2011, 2012, and at the time, and that's point two here, the Public Interest Research Group had estimated that higher ed students were spending about applied that by the 2011 statistic from the ABA of 140,000 law students. There are quite a few fewer law students today, but the number came out to about $154 million. Even if you think about it with 100,000 law students, that's point one there. If they're spending $1,500 a year on casebooks at full retail, which is a casebook can be over $200, $250, and they're only buying 6 of them, maybe not all their courses are substantive law or doctrine law, that still comes out to $1,500. But even if that number is wildly overestimated, I don't think it terribly is, but even if it's at one half or one third, 50 or $100 million, I still think this is a valid pitch or a valid point to make. And the reason why is it's actually not about the money. The money aspect of this is a tragedy. The money aspect of this is attractive because students don't want to spend it, and you don't want to make them spend it. But the real power of the idea of an open casebook is in another place, and that's pretty much what this talk is going to be about. So first, I got to start with, well, what is an open casebook? And I rely on David Wiley. He's a well-known OER, Open Education Resources dude. And he's written an article and promulgated basically the 5 R's. Retain, reuse, revise, remix, redistribute, which I've paraphrased here. This is my writing, not his. Everyone gets a copy. You can do what you want with it. You can make changes to it, mess around with it. You can mix it with other stuff, assuming you have permissions to do so. And then you can share all that in exactly the same way. So it becomes recursive, or it becomes redistributive, right? And you can do that without having to go through a process of asking formal permission of the copyright owners, because if it's truly open, then they've used a license, either Creative Commons or something else, in which those are built in. In other words, I want to do stuff, I don't have to ask permission to do it. So the thing to think about with this is, what business models does this open casebook model break? And if you think about it, well, first of all, it breaks the rental market. The rental market says that you'll have access to a book for a limited amount of time, and that there's some sort of digital rights management, DRM, that's going to stop you from having access to it after that time period is up. That would break retain, and traditional publishers certainly don't want you to redistribute the materials, because then they can't. Then the first student in would purchase it and share it with the others. So all of these or almost all of these are antithetical to the traditional publisher model that we've been using for, I haven't gone into the history of when commercial casebooks happened. I know about Christopher Columbus Langdell, and I'll talk about him in a second. But for at least, I would say, 50 years or so. So this is a new business model for this. This started way back in 2006. Actually, it started in 1992. Cali actually did a project in 1992 where we used folio views. I'm sounding like an old tech dude here. We used folio views. We put them on a laptop for a cohort of students, and then we surveyed the heck out of them to see how well it went. About half the students totally got it. They loved using the computer. instead of the paper casebook, and about half of them just couldn't make actual permissions to do that with the existing casebooks, and we weren't able to go much further with the project way back in the early 90s. So back in 2006, I resurrected this. I was the keynote. I took over the keynote slot at my own conference. I called it Rip, Mix, Learn, and that was inspired by Napster. Those of you who are old enough to remember, Napster was free, illegal music. But what was cool about it was you could find music by typing in a search box, and then you could make your own, not mixtapes. This was beyond cassettes. You could make your own playlists, and it was wonderful, and it was powerful, and it was fantastic. And that's where Apple came up with this idea, the Rip, Mix, Burn. They wanted you to feed your CDs into their Macs, rip the tracks off, and then reorder them into playlists any way you want. They came out with the iPod in 2001. They came out with iTunes so that you could legally do that at 99 cents per song. And so the culture of Rip, Mix, Burn was born. And that's what sort of was inspiring us. The other thing that was inspiring us was this fellow here, Christopher Columbus Langdell. And I was trying to imagine, well, what if he were to come around today? He's the inventor of the casebook, as you may or may not know. Inventor, I'm air quoting that. If he were around today, Langdell would probably, want this to be a digital medium as well, right? He's a modern guy, or he can adapt. He would say to his faculty, well, you're all gonna write your own casebooks, for your own materials, but we're gonna organize this as a database or as a website or as a repository, where you all work in the same set of tools with the same collection of public access or open cases, openly available cases, and maybe there would be vertical cohorts of faculty. So all the contracts professors will work on their contracts books. All the environmental law professors and so on. And there's some of this you even see today, right? The cyberprof list, they because cyber law changes so rapidly, they share materials all the time and are essentially building their own teaching materials on an ongoing basis. So the idea is there would be some mother of all casebooks, one big damn database. It would be digital, and out of that idea, that's what we were thinking about in terms of E. Langdell, we called it E. Langdell. I regret this name horribly. It's sort of silly, but it's Googleable. It was trademarkable, and it sort of works for us. Casebooks for law students, a good idea. Well, there's a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm mostly going to focus on the e-book versions of open casebooks. I will get around to the print versions very quickly and talk about some of the controversies or the issues there, but let's start with the e-books. So first of all, a truly open casebook is something that you can download in multiple formats. So not just the PDF, which doesn't play well with mobile devices. It's hard to zoom and scan and things like that. Ebook versions, whether you've got an iPad or a Kindle. Notice I've got in here Nook or other non-Kindle devices. Are there any? There's a few left. I still surviving, I guess. But the point is to give the students the choice to do whatever they want, whatever environment or they're already or ecology they're already familiar with. It's strange though. We did a survey a while back of students and said, well, what's the number one thing you would like about open casebooks? And believe it or not, money was not at the top of the list. The number one thing they liked about the idea of ebooks was that they didn't weigh anything. They were not happy, and I've heard apocryphal stories of students buying their books, band sawing off the binder and only bringing the chapters, or 3-hole punching them and only bringing the chapters they need to class. So weight is one thing. Another one is it's hard to lose an ebook, because you can make a copy of it, or you can go, if it's an open book, you can just go get another copy from the original website. So no losing of the paper book. Another thing is you can search it. At the very least, Control F, and if it's in some other format or other Control F, and if it's in some other format or other reader format that has better search capabilities, all the better. Another thing is you can highlight it, which you can certainly do with physical books, but you can do multiple colors. You can even tag your highlighting. If you're using the Microsoft Word version of the book, you could use different styles so that you can extract them using various tools. There's all sorts of interesting possibilities with student annotation that are possible with an electronic version that are impossible with the physical book, with the P-book. So I'm imagining, the student going through and putting things like, this is going to be on the exam for sure. So it makes it easier for that sort of capability. There's also some interesting possibilities that I haven't seen much of in the wild, but I imagine happens, and that is if you have the open content version of a book and it's in a version that Google Docs can read, like Microsoft Word, you could drop it into Google Docs, and from there the students could do this without as the teacher's knowledge, and they could share, they could create study groups around chapters or around the text of the book, with each one of them providing their notes for the thing. And if you as the faculty want to benefit from this capability, I chose Law of Wills there, and that's Brownie Lewis. You can imagine the faculty member dropping annotations or notes or ideas into that Google Doc as a sort of a shared knowledge base for the entire class to access. You can't do that with a paper book. You can't do that with a paper book or with an ebook that's got heavy digital rights management. What else can you do? Well, if you have an ebook, you can run it through a text-to-speech system and what else can you do? Well, if you have an ebook, you can run it through a text-to-speech system and turn it into a podcast. There are apps that will do that. I mean, Amazon, of course, has Audible, but there are apps that will do that, for free. And so you can go running or walk the dog or whatever it is as a student and listen to a chapter, a text chapter or something like that. I imagine it would also make a good way to fall asleep at night. Although I have read articles where listening to your materials while you sleep will subconsciously or subliminally teach you something. I don't know how true those are, though. Again, the faculty angle on that is, and I've got Steve Johnson's Wetlands course book here. You can imagine the instructor or even the author in this case, and Steve Johnson has created some videos. I can't remember if he's created podcasts. Pick the particularly difficult parts of the course being taught, do a little 5 or 10 minute podcast, make it available to the student, and even link it, even link it from the case book itself, so that there's both or reading and listening going on. Multiple modalities are possible with when the material is open like this. So I have to talk about the print versus the digital, because there are actually some science around the idea that students learn better from reading from the paper book versus reading from the screen. Now, back in '92, and for that matter, even all up into the mid 2000s, the big argument against electronic education books was that nobody will spend more than 20 minutes reading at a screen. Their eyes will melt. They'll be fatigue. And for the most part, that argument has been proven not true, because we all, and some of us more than others, spend 6-8 hours looking at screens all day long. I read an enormous amount on my smartphone, mostly fiction books. And nonfiction books as well, though. I do lots of reading. Sometimes I admit when I want to read more carefully, I will print things out so I can circle and underline and highlight. But what's cool about open ebooks is I get a choice. I can download the Microsoft Word version and read it on my screen and take notes. I can download the PDF and use PDF annotators. I can buy the print version and read the paper, or I could print parts of the PDF version and read off of that interface which is known as paper. Paper is just another interface in this case. And so it's that freedom or that capability, that agency that I get to decide how I'm going to consume the media. That agency that I get to decide how I'm going to consume the media that I think is a powerful reason for why this is good for students. So in case you're scared that open books are too expensive, if you print them out, well, here's the price of our judicial ethics and conduct. I picked this because it's got 182 pages, and you can see it costs $6.86 and comes in 3 to 5 days. Now we made a deal or Lulu is our POD, our print on demand, and the deal with Lulu is if you do not put a profit on the book, in other words, we're not trying to make more than the cost of printing it, then they won't either. So they're super supportive of nonprofits and open education materials like this, and that's why that price is ridiculously cheap. So here's a more realistic one, 686 pages. This is Ruth Ann Robson's Liberty, Equality, and Due Process. Anything would only cost $12. Here's John Fabian Witt's Torts. We got a new edition coming out. Now this one's $22, and the reason is he put a whole bunch of color graphics charts in it, and when you print in color, it raises the price because obviously Lulu has to use a color printer for some of the pages. Still, 700 pages, $22. That's ridiculous. The smaller books like Sources of American Law, Bo Steenken and Tina Brooks, very popular legal research book. $4.22. And in case you're wondering, it must cost a ton to mail it, that's the cost of mailing all of those books, or any one of those books. They'll put it in USPS for $3.99. It'll take a couple of weeks. They'll do ground 2 to 5 days for $9, and if you're in a big hurry, then you're going to pay more than the cost of the book to print. So I don't see that as a problem in terms of costs for printing if that's a preferred base for the user. So finally, why is this good for students? Well, if it's an open book and you're not going to try to make money on it on a per book sale, which goes away if you're not going to DRM it because students will share, then yeah, money is a factor, and the students will save the cost of the book for that class. Now, even if you don't. Even if you don't want to, the counter argument to that is that, well, tuition is $30,000-$40,000. So saving even $1,500 is like a percent or two of tuition, and so it barely blips on when you're spending that kind of money. But yet I know that when you go to assign a book, if you're saying here's a book, it costs $250, but you would like to use a chapter or two from a chapter or two from another book, you're not going to do it because you're going to say I'm not going to make them buy two $200 books. If it's an open content book or an open OER book, well, you could say, well, here's this book that you have to pay for, but I'm also really like the way they did this chapter or this graph or this material in this other book, and it's free. So open books allow you to do a little bit of rip mix learning, even if it's not your primary text for the course. So there's lots of articles about why textbooks are getting more expensive. I read a bunch of them for this, but I didn't want to get into try to explain it other than we all know that they're in the $250 range. But let me jump right in on why this is also a good thing for law faculty, I believe. So first of all, it's all based on the fact that an open content book will be Creative Commons licensing. And what that means, and this is a variation on Dave Wiley's 5 R's, right? It means you can share, you can copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format. So it can be transformed. Or you can adapt it. You can remix it and build upon the material. Now, this is the license that we use at eLangdell, so this is the one I'm referring to. There are other licenses where you don't have to attribute the author, or you're allowed to do commercial versions, resell, something like that. This is what we settled on after a lot of thought. So based on this, you have to realize that if you're one of those faculty that does share your materials, your book now on SSRN or through other means, PDF is often not good enough. I'm not criticizing you for it because any sharing is better than no sharing in my book. And but PDF limits the ways you can adapt or remix or redistribute or reuse, and that's why having the original source format, be it Microsoft Word or WordPerfect or whatever it is, something that the faculty users or the students can reuse in a way that suits their environment, is a better way to go for this sort of thinking. So that's why Microsoft Word is our preferred sort of reshareable format there. So why else is this good for law faculty? Well, let's say the book that you like so much covers an enormous amount of material, but you're going to be teaching a shorter version of the course. Well, you still have to make them buy the whole book, and your syllabus has to tell them skip the last 12 chapters or something like that. If it was an open content book, you could just delete those chapters. Those of other books or with public domain materials, or you could pull a case that's not covered or just came out and edit it and use it yourself. You can add your own commentary. So you can imagine the book being almost like what do they call those? An illuminated book. The Talmud was one of my inspirations for this too, where you had the holy text in the middle, and circling around it was the commentary by various scholars. So the author could be one scholar, you are another one, and probably the most important one to the students, because they care about what you think of the material more than they do what they think the author of the book does, because that's what's going to be on the final. And finally, nobody ever teaches in the same order as the table of contents of a book, but you fix that by having a syllabus that says read chapter 3, then read chapter 1, then read chapter 2. You can fix that if you want by just reordering the chapters yourself. You have the original source. Go for it. All right, and you can do all this without asking permission. All right, I got about 5 minutes left, and so I'm cooking here. So how is this possible? I mean, how can we get away with doing something like this? Well, you got to look at the costs of publishing a book. And I found lots of different graphics like this. This was my favorite one. And you see things like the shipping costs, the campus bookstore costs. Of course, the publisher has to make a profit. The author gets paid a royalty. There's marketing costs and so on. And so I read a bunch of articles and tried to narrow this down to something that I could just slap onto one slide. So it's about 20% for a bookstore, 20% for printing. The authors generally get somewhere between 5 and 15% per book, so about 10%. I pick the middle. The publisher spends I pick the middle. The publisher spends about 50% of the money there on marketing, editorial cost, admin, overhead, and makes about 10% themselves. Those numbers, of course, all go up or down based on different markets. This is, as near as I could find, this is what higher ed textbooks are. There's almost no information out there that I could find about specifically about traditional legal casebook publishers, but good enough for government work. So if it's an open casebook or a consortia model, as I call it, the bookstore goes away. It's an ebook, and the printing part is print on demand, so we save 20% there. The printing goes away as well. It's 20% if you stick with just the ebook. But even as you saw, even if you do buy the printed version, it's not going to be 20%. It's not going to cost $20. It's typically going to be costing $5 to $10. For the author either has done this themselves for the good of their students and for the community, or somebody has paid them. Maybe the dean gave them a summer off or a stipend, or maybe Cali paid them to write those books. We pay all of our authors to write their books and to keep them up to date. And so there is no ongoing royalty stream per se. Marketing is not 20% in open books. This is our marketing. We tell people about this. And we hope word of mouth works. We do spend some money on brochures and mailings and getting out and telling people about it, but we don't have a sales force. Open Books OER doesn't have a sales force going around and showing you the latest versions of books. There are still editorial and administrative costs, very important costs. We pay editors to review the material for continuity and consistency, as well as legal accuracy. Now, they're not going to catch every single mistake, but they're gonna catch the big ones. And the automated tools that exist today, like the examples that I'll give you are Grammarly or Perfected or such, are so powerful. They catch a lot of the really bad or the really egregious grammatical errors, the split infinitives, and the Oxford commas and so on. And finally, because we're a nonprofit, and if others are doing this on a nonprofit basis, there is no profit thing. So as a result, out of a $100 casebook, maybe $20 of that is the actual, or $25 of that is the actual cost for the product. The other thing that's good about it is we do pay our faculty. So if any of you are interested in writing a book, we've published several dozen of them. Go to that website, cali.org/Elingdale, become an author, and submit a proposal. I've put aside money from the Cali budget specifically for this project, and we have lots of interest in doing much more of this. So, pitch your area of joy, what sparks joy of teaching to you, and it doesn't even have to be an entire casebook. We'll entertain chapters, because we know maybe you've got a great book, but there's just one or two chapters that are problematic, and so you want to rewrite that chapter. We're interested. Like I said, we published a couple of dozen books. They're all written by law faculty. They're all reviewed by books. They're all written by law faculty. They're all reviewed by law faculty. They've been downloaded over 100,000 times, and they're CC licensed. Elmer, my guy, my web guy, every so often he does that. He says if those 100,000 books were purchased at only $100 each, that'd be $10 million worth of value generated for law schools. So keep supporting us to do that, is what I'm saying. So why is this vital? This isn't just sort of like it's a good idea. I think this is actually core vital for legal education. The law is getting so much more complex. There's so much more to cover. And teaching multidisciplinary classes, which is to say a class that covers both multiple substantive areas, or involves both the legal research part of the case, the litigation part of the subject area, are on the rise, are on the rise. And most case books are fairly narrowly tuned to the specific doctrinal material or subject that they're covering. The traditional publishing cycle can't keep up with this. I'm going to back off on that and say, actually, they're pretty fast. I'm impressed with them, but we all know that they can't keep up with updates. If there's a new book every 2 or 3 or 4 years, then it's 3 or 4 years out of date. There's always new cases. It's a busy time in the law. So with an open book, you can download those new cases and insert them yourselves. Ebooks were made for distance learning. If you're teaching a bunch of students and they never show up to your building, how much better for them that they can also download the book, or that you can pull up the book yourself as part of the webinar, like what we're doing right now. And my two want to take notes, if they want to increase fonts, if they want to keep the book and do things with it, not have to lose it after a rental period, then more power to them. And faculty too should have that same agency. You want to create the best possible learning environment, ecology, experience for your students, but you need the permission to do that, and only in open case books, I believe, or if you build them yourselves, will you be able to do that. The traditional publishers have to stay in business. I understand that. But as a result, they make decisions that are antithetical to this model. They create silos of dependency, a code which the students can only use for a semester to look at multiple choice questions or PowerPoints that are tied to the book, but you can't edit. I believe that this is all part of teaching, which is the core responsibility of law schools. It's literally what law schools do. And so you shouldn't be outsourcing this. Law schools. It's literally what law schools do. And so you shouldn't be outsourcing this at all anymore. Now that the means of production are in the workers' hands. I'm sounding like a communist, but I'm not a communist no matter what Oren Kerr says. So that's a joke. When I originally wrote the article back in 2012, Oren at the Volk Conspiracy made a little joke about how this looks a little bit like communism, and he was kidding, and he backed off on it. But I couldn't thank him enough for pointing to my article from the Volk Conspiracy because it got a lot of attention, which goes to show you that no publicity is bad publicity. So if any of you want to call me or call this, a communist plot, please do loudly and vocally so that it draws more attention to this. Anyhow, the point being is that we need to be able to experiment with all kinds of new modalities, new delivery options, new innovations in courses and curriculum going on into the future. And to do that, the materials, the step of having to get formal permissions and figuring out who owns what has to be is too much of an obstacle, I would claim. And so with the open books, we can do more quicker. So the traditional casebook, though, is still how the majority teach, and that's fine. And that's why our model is E-Langdell casebooks, and you can print them, and they look like casebooks. But it's not where we're headed. And I don't know what the new model is going to look like. It's hopefully going to be interactive with virtual reality glasses, or it's going to be a chip in our head or something like that. But however it emerges, we should be involved in that innovation experiment. And the only way for us to be involved is for there to be a collection of materials that own truths towards better teaching. So that's what I got to say. Thanks so much for listening. I went a couple minutes over, but I'm going to now open up for